Humans love stories. We always have. Where communication is meant to convey information, stories are specifically meant to convey cultural information. And this was the whole point of the ancient myths of the past, those featuring Greek gods and talking animals. But that's just as true today, up to and including the most modern form of storytelling we have, interactive storytelling, aka games. I'm here to show you that games, specifically those featuring a story, so not Pong, are a lot like myths. They're meant to be used as tools of moral teaching. The example I've chosen to prove that video games have important moral lessons happens to be the most infamously amoral game in mainstream media, Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto by Rockstar Games is a single-player open-world game where you roam around a city causing as much mayhem as you like. This game is famous for its unrelenting disregard for morals. This is a game where you can steal any car you like, drive around, run over people, shoot them, steal things, so on and so forth. But there's more to it than just gratuitous violence. In fact, scholars have been working very hard to prove this. In an article about Grand Theft Auto, Kiri Miller of Brown University claimed that Grand Theft Auto has a lot in common with folklore. She specifically compares the games to the Brothers Grimm tales, whose dark and violent stories were moral and are still prevalent in culture today. There's a reason for that. There's a reason we're so obsessed with games, and there's a reason we've been obsessed with stories since the beginning of humanity. Rudolf Bultmann explains that the purpose of myths is to use the language of the physical world to describe the inner world. Myths are full of metaphors that connect with the subconscious mind, and that's why they're often so weird with, again, the talking animals and the Greek gods. But they're just as weird today. I mean, take a look at Mario. But that doesn't stop us from loving Mario so much. There's a reason that doesn't bother us, though. Our brains are so in tune with these hidden metaphors that we feel engaged despite the weirdness. It's a suspension of disbelief that lets us enjoy these weird things and learn from them without knowing that we're doing that. Grand Theft Auto takes full advantage of this suspension of disbelief to create absolutely absurd situations, and we love it. Grand Theft Auto gives the player the power to take any vehicle they want, kill wantonly, drive a tank around a city causing mayhem and destruction, and still have the ability to get away with it. This isn't realistic. This is meaningful. It's purposeful. It's a satire of the media's expectations of games and people who play games. It goes overboard with the violence and shows that it doesn't mean anything. It's purposefully ludicrous. This represents a conflict in the meaning of the game, which connects us back to myths. Famous anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss states, myths create a fictional conflict between two opposites, so as to imagine a similar resolution to a higher conflict in the myth's culture. Basically, myths see a conflict in culture, and they create a metaphorical substitute for either sides of the conflict, and resolve it in a fictional scenario so as to give the viewer a sense of peace. For example, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic uses the light and dark sides of the Force to represent a conflict between good and evil, and it gives the player the choice which path to take. Similarly, the GTA games mediate a cultural conflict between being desensitized by violence in the media and being repulsed by it. However, Grand Theft Auto's resolution to this conflict is through an ironic lens. It desensitizes the player to violence, and then shows that it's absurd, that it doesn't make any sense. And believe me, the game doesn't condone this behavior. The characters you play as, the protagonists, the avatars through which you perform your evil deeds, are clearly bad people, and very unhappy with their lives. Much like villains in movies are clearly evil, and the audience knows this, and therefore they know that everything that the villain is doing is bad. We know that the characters we're playing as are not good people. Švelch argues that this discrepancy between the morality of the player and the morality of the avatar lets the player step back and disengage from the story morally. The fact that you can't morally empathize with the avatar, the thing you're playing with, prevents you from being morally engaged. It prevents you from learning that this violence is okay. So what you're left with is a lesson about the futility of violence in video games and a very fun city to play with. In conclusion, Grand Theft Auto plays the same role as a myth, and so do many other games out there. It's a representative of our culture. It's a look into ourselves as people, and it gives us meaningful moral lessons. In this case, it's about violence in commercial media, but it's not just that. It's not just what it means, but the fact that it means something more than itself. The importance of this is to show that video games have a lot more to give than what can be seen at face value. They're interactive storytelling. They're part of our culture. They're modern myths, and they say a lot about us. And there's a lot to learn from studying them. Thank you.